Hello there everybody, Sam's Trains here, welcome back to the railway and welcome to a Bachmann American tank engine review. So as I say, yes, today's tank engine is made by Bachmann and it is a USA tank engine, although it isn't produced by Bachmann USA, it's produced by Bachmann branch line. And believe it or not, today's class of loco did in fact exist and run here in the UK. If you want to know why that was, stay tuned and I'll tell you the story about it a little bit later on. But today's loco is this, it is the Bachmann USA dock tank, and I've actually had this loco for 3 or 4 months, but I've never had it out of the box. In fact, you probably remember I bought this from Worley, so that's a long time ago, and I've had to wait until now to open it, and that has been very difficult. It's been so difficult not to just open it and have a quick look. I wake up in a cold sweat some mornings and think, oh, I wonder what that Bachmann USA dock tank's like. That's not true, but you know what I mean, it's very difficult. And so yeah, I bought this from the Model Rail stand. These at the moment are Model Rail exclusives, so you can only get them from Model Rail. They do have a website, so you can order them from there, although it is a little bit more expensive. They were selling them at quite a discount at the exhibitions. So if you want to pick one of these up and you're able to go to an exhibition that Model Rail are going to, that's probably the cheapest way to get these, because the RRP, or Model Rail's online price for these, is £124 something, 95 I think. So that's quite a high price tag, so we'll have to keep that in mind while we look at the model. But here we go then with the USA dock tank for the first time. Here we go, I'm going to be opening it up. Goodness knows how I've had the self-control not to just peek, but I promise you I haven't. So let's take a look and see what this one's like. So yes, you can probably just about see it inside the box there, and as is clear, this is in the LMR livery, which you might recognise because I recently reviewed another loco in this livery. It was the Bachmann War Department 280 locomotive. There we go, and you can check that out if you want to see it. So let me show you the end of the box then. So you have a slightly different model code to usual because this is the Model Rail exclusive. So you've got MR Model Rail 105, it's the USA class 060T 300, I think that's the running number there. It's Frank S. Ross, LMR Blue, and Frank S. Ross is the name, and we'll see that on the nameplate, I think. And yes, as I've been saying, it's produced exclusively for Model Rail, and just below there you can see it supports a 6-pin DCC decoder, if that's what you want to fit. And then around the back of the box, if I just flip this over, you'll be able to see a little brief history of the USA tanks. So if you want to read that, if you want to pause it and read it, do feel free to, as per usual, but I will give you a little bit of that later on. So, here we go. Always get a little bit excited when it's a fresh unboxing, and I do think it makes the best reviews when I wait and don't get the loco out of the box until I'm filming it. I just think I get more excited, and I quite like that. So I apologise if you're one of those people that doesn't like seeing reviewers get excited, but honestly, if I could help it, I would. Okay, so there it is in the blister pack. Very interesting looking. It's quite a heavy pack, in fact, and I haven't got the loco out yet. It normally doesn't feel all that heavy until you've got just the loco in your hands. Okay, so we've got some paperwork, which is all nice and neatly folded. So let's have a quick look if I can get the best bit out. Oh, here we go. So I think this is what we want to be looking at. This is the USA Tank Locomotive Owner's Information. There we go. So yeah, it's nicely colour printed, as you can see. It's got a little bit about running in, accessories, lubrication. Well, it's very nicely printed, I've got to say that. Look at all this. Beautiful diagrams. Yes, it's quite comprehensive, is that. And yeah, obviously it shows you how to fit the decoder and such. So yeah, that is very handy. And if I ever did obviously want to fit this with DCC, I would use that just to find out how it all comes apart. Okay, for now then, let's get this out and have a quick look. Well, not a quick look, we'll have a very in-depth look. Okay, so detail pack to start with then. It's stuck to the top of the package, so we'll have a look. And I say detail pack, but it really does look like it's just the brake rigging, which is quite nice. That means that the rest of the detail has been pre-fitted to the model, which I quite like because I'm a touch on the clumsy side and I'm not all that good at fitting minute details. Although, incidentally, with the previous LMR loco I looked at, I did manage to fit the nameplates without issue, which I was quite pleased about, let's say. Okay, let's not put this off any longer. Let's get this out. Well, it's very well packaged. It's got some little bits of rubbery plastic on it just to protect it, which is good. And sure enough, it looks to be in great condition. And for the first ever time, here we go. So there it is, Frank S. Ross in the LMR Blue. And it is very different to the LMR Blue of my War Department 280. As you can see, the rods and such are not painted red. as they were on the 280, and a few people had a few things to say about that. Some people really liked it, and a few people thought it made them look a little bit toy-like. So I don't really know where I stand on that, but it's not an issue with this one. You've got that white trim on the wheels there, which looks very attractive. So yeah, it's relatively heavy. I'm quite impressed with the weight of that. I'll just touch it to my lips. Yeah, it feels like the bodywork is made of plastic, it would seem, and there's certainly not much in the way of running board on this loco, being that it's American, so I can't tell exactly what is made of die-cast, so I'll have to have a good look at that and let you know once we get onto the up-close details and such. But for the time being, there it is, there's the first look. We will look at this in a lot more detail in just a second, but here we go then with a little bit of history on the US dock tanks. Here we go. So the Southern Railway USA class were originally built in 1942 at the Vulcan Iron Works in Pennsylvania. The design was originally intended for transportation of troops during the Second World War, but in 1943 a selection of these locomotives were shipped to the UK in anticipation of a possible invasion. Following the war, 15 of the class were actually purchased by the Southern Railway for use on the Southampton docks in order to replace the ageing B4 tank engines. You'll probably remember those because I reviewed a B4 only this year. And these USA tank engines were ideal for dock work really, because they had quite a short wheelbase and yet they were large enough to make a suitable replacement for the existing traction there. Now 6 remain in preservation today, but only 4 were from the batch that were originally sent to the UK during the 1940s. The other 2 I believe were imported from Yugoslavia, and this model, as I said, is as preserved from December 2017. Alright then, so there she is, the very unusual, or at least unusual to a Brit, USA dock tank from Bachmann. Now, I'm going to start talking about the detail in just a second, but I want to make a minor correction straight away, because just now I said that this was as preserved, right? And there is a USA dock tank preserved in the LMR blue with the name Frank S. Ross, but that one is considerably different. It's got a completely different cab and coal bunker, and also the livery is quite a bit different as well. Even the nameplate, quite noticeably, is fitted a lot lower down. So I reckon this one must be modelled from as it would have been in the day. Yes, I apologise for that. I suppose you could use this one as the preserved version, but if you look closely, there are some considerable differences, let's say. Alright, so having had a good look at the detail now, I do have to say that even at the discounted price that Model Rail were selling these for at the Worley exhibition, I have to say I don't feel as though I've got great value for money. Sounds like a broken record, but I'll talk more about that in just a second because I want to talk positive to start with. And so I have to say that the livery on this has been applied to a very, very high standard, which is often, if not always, the case from Bachmann. So if you take a look at the side of the tanks there, the lining is very, very crisply done. And the same thing goes with the side of the cab there. You just can't fault the application of the lining there, and also the lettering and numbering there on the side of the cab, which has been done very, very well. Even the Frank S. Ross nameplate looks pretty good there on the side of the tank, although unfortunately this model didn't come with any etched nameplates, which I think is a little bit naughty given the RRP. And that's just a little bit of a comment, because obviously the price of this, £124, places this right up high in terms of pricing for a tank engine this size, and so I was perhaps expecting that to be etched, but however you can see that that hasn't been applied too badly. So yeah, paintwork has to be a plus, and of course I would also probably ought to mention the lining on the wheel set, which does look pretty good. I mean, that has been done to a high standard. But I have to say there are parts of the model which look a little bit cheap and nasty, which is very, very unusual for a tank engine that is so expensive. There are lots of big ungainly gaps on this model, and that's the first thing I noticed really when I got it out. Now I have to say the prototype did have gaps between different components and such, but they weren't quite as ungainly as they are on this model, and as you can see on the safety valve dome there, that does look like very cheap, unpleasant plastic. That doesn't look as it did on the real thing, which is a little bit odd. And also the same thing goes with the buffers. The buffers are not sprung, which is very, very odd for a locomotive that costs so much. Now don't get me wrong, I don't mind that a model doesn't have sprung buffers if the price of the model reflects that. One thing that really rubs me up the wrong way is when a manufacturer cuts costs like that and then doesn't represent that with their pricing of the model. That's really bizarre. And the same thing goes really for the whistles and the safety valves. As you can see, a lot of it is just made of plastic, and it's chunky, unrealistic looking plastic as well. It's clearly plastic. There's, well, I won't say there's no attempt to make it look metallic, but regardless of that, it doesn't look metallic anyway. And also the same thing goes with the pipework below the cab. Although it is very complex, and I have to sort of take my hat off off to them on the complexity of it there, it's very rare that you would get pipework on a real locomotive which is matte black like this. Obviously it's copper coloured or at least metallic looking, and that's certainly the case also with the USA dock tanks, but it's not the case with the model. So there are a few gripes with this really. As I say, high expectations were set by the price of the model, and those high expectations weren't necessarily met now that it's out of the box, and I have to say that I've noticed that quite a lot from Bachmann. But there are certainly areas of the model that are impressive on the front of the detail. As you can see, I do like the smoke box door here, which is really interesting. It looks completely different, in fact, to the way the UK models look. You've got this sort of inverted handrail, which looks really interesting. And the buffer beams are quite interesting as well. If we look down on the front one here, you can see that it's attached in quite an unusual way. And in fact, the buffer beams are made of die-cast, I should say that. There's a very small amount of visible die-cast on this model, but the buffer beams are. And as you can see, we've got the separately fitted lamp irons on this model, which are very sturdy, and I have to say the majority of the detail on this model is very sturdily fitted, which has to be a plus. The cab is also quite an impressive area on the model. As you can see, we've got the glazed windows on the front there, which is great to see, and the cab interior has been picked out in considerable detail. You can see there is quite a lot of painted detail inside there. Once again, though, it hasn't been done to the standard of certain models that we see these days. For example, there is no paintwork on the gauges and that sort of thing, and there are very few colours used on the inside. So again, that's perhaps a little bit below what you'd expect for a £124 model, although it is at least nice to see a painted cab, so perhaps we shouldn't complain too much about that. And then around the back of the cab, you have at least got some very realistic looking rear windows, as well as a lamp iron on the back. And as you can see, the coal load inside there is the usual Bachmann coal load really. It's a little bit glossy looking, but overall not too bad looking. And I should also say that the wheel set and the set of rods is all nice and fine scale, and quite interestingly you can see it's the rear wheel that's driven by the valve gear there, which is very interesting. Normally it's the centre one with British models, which is a bit of an observation, and yes, so that's quite unusual, and I like the look of that. And then I suppose finally on the housekeeping side, you do have the two NEM couplings pre-fitted to the model, which is quite good to see. I suppose if you didn't want to use the front one, you could remove that and make it look a little more realistic, but as it comes out of the box, those are fitted. So yeah, overall clearly quite a nicely detailed model. I mean, look at the level of detail on the side of the smoke box there. It is impressive in areas, but once again, the high price did set higher expectations. I would have expected a little bit more die-cast, I would have expected sprung buffers, and of course metal whistles and such. But apart from that, it isn't too bad at all. I must say I do like the look of it. It's so unusual and interesting, and since I got the War Department 280 in the LMR blue, I've really grown quite fond of the LMR blue. So once again, it's quite enjoyable to have a second LMR blue loco to the fleet. Okay, so that's that then. That is the detail. It's mediocre in places and pretty above average in others, I would say. Overall, reasonably impressive. Okay, so let's get this down onto the track then, and we will do a little bit of performance. Okay, so there she is then. There is Frank S. Ross down onto the track, ready for the first ever run. So quick disclaimer to start with, the performance right now might not be as good as it is later on, because as it stands, she hasn't yet been running. This will be her first ever run. So yes, it does say in the instructions that it needs to be running for 30 minutes in each direction before you can put a load on, and that's what I intend to do today. But first of all, let's just see how it runs straight out of the box, just for comparison to other locos, of course. So I'm just turning the power up right now. And yes, it has started to creep forwards quite slowly, I would say. If I can get it just there, yeah, that is really quite slow. Now, I haven't talked very much about the actual mechanism, which I ought to do, so yes, it's pretty good with this one actually. It gets a thumbs up. A lot of the Bachmann locos don't have proper bearings on the axles, and that was the case with the LMR 280 War Department Austerity, but this one does. There is a proper set of bearings on the wheel set for this one, so that's a thumbs up. It's got all-wheel pickup, which you would expect from an 060 tank, and it's, I think, as far as I can tell, without having the body off yet, I think it does have the standard Bachmann 3-pole motor, which is less good. I still don't understand why Bachmann have to keep going with their weird proprietary 3-pole motor when just standard 5-pole can motors cost a lot less and they work a lot better in my experience. I don't know why Bachmann do that. Well, I guess it's so that they have their own motor, so that if you need to buy a replacement, you don't just go on eBay and buy one, you have to get it from them. So it's smart thinking, I suppose, from Bachmann's side, but it's not exact. Once again, it's not a system designed with the customer in mind, let's say. But yeah, as you can tell, that is quite a good crawl. It's cut out. Oh no, it hasn't. It just stalled. Yeah. So anyway, yeah, not a bad crawl with this one. And that's unrunning as it is at the moment. So we can only expect that to get better. And also, look at those rods. I really do like the valve gear on this one. And as I say, I love the fact that that back wheel is driven. It stopped again. That has cut out that time. There we go. Okay, let's try it on the express point. Be a bit more forgiving and go a bit faster than that. There we are. Well, it got over the express point without a problem. Let's just bring it back. Let's bring it back a bit more slowly, shall we? Ah, no, it's cut out straight away. Go on. Oh, a bit more power. Yeah, it seems to be struggling a little bit, but yeah, it isn't too bad. Not too bad. So yeah, overall, I'm quite impressed. As I say, this hasn't been running yet, so it's unfair to expect her to be running at her best right now. So I think what we'll do is I will start her going at a reasonable speed, and we will watch her go around the layout for a little while. And then we'll load her up later on and see what she pulls like. But for now, here we go. So I think actually then, assuming it is able to pull a decent load, I do think the performance is my favourite feature of the model, to be honest with you, because up close I think it could have done with being a bit more refined in terms of the detail, especially because £125 places this basically as expensive as it gets for an 060 tank engine. But yeah, the performance seems to redeem that, at least in a small way. So yes, overall I would say if anything it is the price that lets this down. Because really as a mid-range tank engine, I think this is actually a pretty decent model, and if they sold it for say £70, I would find the detail on it to be more than satisfactory really. It's just a little bit disheartening to spend so much on a model and to find that they've economised on certain details, where really they should have pulled out all of the stops given how much they were going to be selling these for. Okay, so I'll be back with you then in just a second. I'll let her finish running in and then we'll try some pulling tests. Alright, I'll be right back. Okay, we are back and she is now completely run in, I'm happy to say. And yep, she does seem to be a reasonably nice, smooth performer. A little bit noisy perhaps, but that's really about the only criticism I can give to this. So let's just see then whether she's any smoother, or slower I should say, now that she's had a chance to run in. Oops, sorry, that was probably my fault. I think it was a bit of a jerky start. Let's try one more time. Just increasing it very, very slightly to see what kind of crawl it will do. There we are, it's just kicked in there. And yeah, I mean, it's a little bit jerky, isn't it? But it's overall pretty impressive. So yes, it is capable of doing quite a good slow crawl. Okay, so I have set up a little bit of a goods train, a mixed goods train for her there. Now, I obviously understand that as dock shunting locomotives, these locos wouldn't have been pulling massive trains. And some people have sort of picked me up on that, saying, you know, it's perhaps unfair of you to have put a long train on and then criticised it for not being able to pull it. That was the case with the Dapo B4. But I just say, obviously, just because they didn't pull such large trains doesn't mean they wouldn't have been able to. And these things are quite, you know, reasonably beefy in real life. So I'm pretty sure that this little train of wagons and things would have been easily pulled by this loco in real life. Although I'm no expert, so do correct me if I'm wrong. But yeah, let's give this a try then. Let's back up and see if we can't couple to it. I should say there's no flywheel in this loco, which means you have got to go quite easy on the controller. Otherwise it has a tendency to stop dead if you're not watching it. I must say I do enjoy seeing them crawl like this. It is great to see a loco performing as well as this, isn't it? Okay, right, well let's see if that was a successful coupling. Yes, that does look very good to me, so let me just change direction and we'll send her off forwards. And she is hauling the train, so I'll just let it pass you here and we'll go and take a look and see if she can haul it up the hill. I reckon she probably will, she seems pretty heavy to me. Okay, so elsewhere on the line I have lots of other shunting engines, many of which would have been used at docks and things. So first of all, on the middle line I have, let me bring this in here, it's a Peckett sandwich. We've got the Peckett in the middle of a train of bread vans, so hopefully you'll enjoy seeing that. I can't resist getting the Hornby Peckett running once in a while. So there we go, that's my Peckett in a bit of a bread sandwich. And then on the very inside line we have the class of locomotives that was replaced when the American dock tanks were brought over. So it is of course the Dapol LSWR B4, which is still a very attractive tank engine, also used on the docks. So see which other shunters you can spot on the line. There is one in the background there, and for now let's go over to Gordon's Hill and see how the USA tank handles those wagons. Got the Peckett sandwich going by there just while we wait for the USA tank to arrive. Do love that Peckett. Hopefully you don't mind seeing it as often as I show it. I know it does seem to crop up in most every video I make, but yeah, unfortunately I can't help that too much. Okay, so here we go then. The American tank is now approaching, and I've tried not to go too over the top with the load today, so I think if she can manage it, it will be reasonable evidence that she's a decent puller. Alright, let's have a close look at those wheels, see if we can detect any slip. Can't seem to. And as I say, I'm not surprised because it is decently heavy, so yep, there's just the proof. It is a decent puller, so that's great, and of course it ought to be as an 060. So that's very, very good, quite pleased with that. And obviously the vast majority of the issues I had with this model are all in the finer details. So once it's up and running, like this, and it's on the layout, you can enjoy it for the beautiful model that it is really, and overall a lot of those issues don't stand out too much. So overall there's not an awful lot to complain about because it is fit for purpose, and I'm certainly enjoying seeing it running, I must admit. Goodness knows where the idea for a Peckett sandwich came from, but I'm hungry, so we'll keep it up, although I'm not going to be eating the Peckett. I ought to just clear that up. So I know some people will get the wrong idea and they'll call the police or something, but yeah, I'm not going to eat the Peckett, don't worry. It looks gorgeous though, doesn't it? Again, I do love the LMR blue. I know some people won't, but I have to admit that I certainly do. I ought to have gotten the 280 running alongside her. That's a running session for another day then, but yes, I will have to do that. Some people have already suggested it, in fact. There's old Kane again, looking great. Nice small train for her today so that she can manage it. And she is doing, so that's good. Very good. Okay then, so here are some of my ratings for the overall quite impressive USA dock tank from Bachmann. Now on the detail, I felt that it was very, very difficult to decide. I felt that 3 stars was a little bit too harsh and 4 stars was a little bit too generous. So I've just gone and done the dreaded half star there and given it a 3 out of 5. I think that is reasonable. Overall the detail is pretty impressive, and in some areas it exceeded what I was expecting. But the lack of sprung buffers and the plastic whistles and some of the unsightly gaps between the different components of the bodywork made it look a little bit more toy-like than it ought to have done for the high price. Performance also 4 out of 5. Actually the slow speed is very, very good, and it seems to be a reasonable puller as well, so I can't really fault it for that. It's just a little bit unreliable, particularly at the slow speeds, and also it isn't quite as quiet and as smooth as certain locos, for example the Hornby Peckett that we've also got running today, but overall the performance is very, very good. And similarly with the mechanism, I can't really fault it, apart from the fact that it does have that 3-pole motor inside there, which are a little bit dated these days, and I don't think it would be fair for me to give this loco a 5 out of 5 for performance when there are other locos that do have much better motors than this. So quality then, once again it was difficult. It was too harsh I think to have given this a 4 out of 5 on the quality, but it would have been unreasonable to give it a 5 because there was so much plastic and not enough die cast on it. So I've given it a 4 out of 5 on this for obvious reasons. The actual quality of the model is pretty good. It's very sturdy in the hands and I can't really fault it for that. So 4 out of 5 there. Value then, I think for the main price of £124, that is far too expensive for this, as you can probably tell. I think the price that Model Rail sell these for at the exhibitions and things is a little bit better. It was certainly 20 or 30 quid cheaper. I think it was more like 20. I can't exactly remember how much I paid, that's the problem. But I remember that it was cheaper, so I think that saves it a little bit. But I've given it a 3 out of 5, so that's right in the middle there. It's not great, it's not bad. I think if you can get them for a good price, particularly second hand, it's not too bad. Okay, overall then, that is 7.45 out of 10. That is a pretty good score. That's about average, isn't it? So into the ranking it goes. There we go, 7th, just below the Dapol B4, funnily enough, and above the War Department 280. So do let me know in the comments what you think about this. Let me know if you think I've been a little bit too harsh. I have to say, I like it a lot more, I'm finding, now that it's down onto the track, than I did when I was looking at it up close. I must say it's growing on me. I wasn't all that impressed to start with, but now it's certainly growing on me. Alright then folks, well I do hope you enjoyed that review. I enjoyed it a lot more once we saw what a good performer it was. So overall I'm very happy with that. So there we go, that is my review of the USA dock tank from Bachmann. As I say, let me know in the comments what you think. But apart from that, I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you all very, very much for your company, and I will see you all before very long. Alright, cheers everybody, have a good day, and I will see you soon. Take care folks.